What's up, peeps? My name is Reese Hester and welcome to another episode of the What to Watch list. It's another month and another month in quarantine. I'm trying to adapt, so that being said, I've continued to watch movies as always, keep creating, trying to keep myself busy. And once again, I'm going to talk about movies I would recommend to y'all. Let's get started. The first movie I would like to talk about is Krisha. It's the debut feature by Trey Edward Schultz, the person who brought you It Comes at Night, and recently Waves, which is my personal favorite out of his filmography. With Krisha, you really see from his debut feature what he can offer in the future. It's refreshing. The movie was refreshing to see. It was very unique. The camera movement and the acting was so erratic and so crazy that you don't know what you're paying attention to. Even though the main character is Krisha, the whole family is so unique in itself as a whole. The whole family acts like another character in itself, and it's so weird. It is very eerie, and Trey makes a good effort at showing how a family event can be really crazy and rambunctious, and the person in front of that craziness and rambunctiousness is Krisha. We don't know about her backstory, but we know that she has a lot of baggage, and she's trying to contend with that while being at a family gathering, and it's very weird and just surreal. I don't know what to think of it, sort of, but I know it was a good, entertaining watch. I thought this movie was extremely unique, and you see some of the same camera movements that Trey uses on his other movies, but as a first feature, it is extremely impressive. The next movie I would like to talk about is The Mountain by Rick Alverson. Now, this is one of the movies that, although I recommend, I have a few reservations for anybody who watches it, because if you're not somebody who cares about cinematography and direction, you really won't like this movie. The acting is kind of like, you don't know really what the characters are thinking. You can't read any characters. Jeff Goldblum and Ty Sheridan, I guess they did a good job. I don't know. You really can't, between those two characters and other characters, you really don't know how they react to stuff, how they think, because they're unreadable, really. If you don't know, the movie's about lobotomy, and that was a controversial practice even back then, and it's becoming out of style, and people don't really care about lobotomies as much. Back in that time, in the late 60s and stuff, they're kind of becoming eradicated at that time. One of the leading lobotomists who is still practicing lobotomies is Jeff Goldblum's character. He takes Ty Sheridan's character under his wing and kind of hires him as like a photographer, taking photos of the procedures. You really get to see a couple of procedures, but it's not graphic. But the act of you seeing the lobotomy in itself is kind of unreal and unnerving. It's kind of disturbing in itself. That alone makes this movie kind of eerie, kind of barren. You don't know what you're watching, but every single shot that I've seen is beautiful, and it kind of contradicts the tone of the actual film. The cinematography is amazing, the direction is amazing, but I don't know about the acting. I don't know as far as direction is concerned what Rick was trying to convey, or was he not trying to convey anything at all. The next movie I would like to talk about is Cut Bank. Now, this movie reminds me of No Country for Old Men because of the themes, the tone, some of the plot points. And from that perspective, I feel like that was kind of a parody of, this movie has been kind of like a parody of No Country of Old Men. And that's not like a diss towards it. I think its efforts as a film is admirable, but I don't know really what else to say about the film other than it has those similar beat points from No Country of Old Men. It was entertaining because some of the characters are extremely unique, but then you get the same story elements in No Country of Old Men. I keep saying that, I feel like a broken record already, and that's not being critical, that's just my observation. Overall, it was a good movie. It's not amazing, but it was a good movie. I would recommend it just for the entertainment factor, because it's like a mystery, and the star power alone and the characters really push that film to its heights that it should be, and that's all it really does. It doesn't try to do too much. These next two movies I'm going to be talking about I've already seen, but I wanted to come back to them to see if my perspective's changed on them and if I feel any different than I did when I first watched them. So that's what I'm going to get into right now. The first movie I'm going to just talk about I've already seen is The Most Violent Year. This is one of the first A24 movies I've seen, and the first A24 movies I bought a copy on DVD of, and I was really impressed by it. But there's one thing I want to note about this movie. I feel like they mismarketed this movie as like a drama action film, but it's more of a drama thriller film. It's about a man trying to keep his moral compass in line and keep his values in check when all around him there's injustice and decay and just sort of anarchy. I saw a short documentary that A24 had about the movie that I didn't see when I saw it. The Most Violent Year is referring to that year where New York was just in a state of dysfunction, decay, crime, anarchy, sort of poverty. It's about a man during that time who has an oil business, who's trying to legitimize himself as a businessman and trying to keep his morals in check and keep his values in check, even though everything around him's crumbling around him and he's been associated with maybe criminals and people who are kind of shady, but he keeps his head on straight throughout most of the movie, almost all of the movie, who just sticks to his guns throughout the whole movie. The movie itself, if it wasn't mismarketed, it should have deserved more credit than it had. It's overall a great movie. The next movie out of the two I've seen is Call Me By Your Name. Everybody's heard of this movie. I don't have to explain it. Now the next movie is completely on the different zip code as some of these other movies. Not necessarily a bad thing, but I'm going left field here, and I really enjoyed watching Killer Bean. Now if you haven't seen Killer Bean, stop right now. Stop watching my video. I'm literally telling you to stop watching the video. Set aside an hour and 20 minutes plus and watch Killer Bean on YouTube, because it is a great movie. And I just really enjoyed it. There's no complaints about this movie, genuinely. I was wholesomely entertained by this movie, and I just love it all around. No complaints about it at all. Now the next movie is another great movie. If any movie that you don't see on this list, just watch this movie next to Killer Bean, but watch Parasite. And if you haven't seen Parasite, what have you been doing? Bong Joon-ho did an excellent job at shooting this movie, telling a story all around, and that's all I'm going to say. And if you have problems with foreign language films, get over yourself and just watch it, because you can read subtitles. The next movie I'm going to talk about is At Eternity's Gate, starring William Dafoe. It's about Vincent van Gogh's last years and days as an artist who has a lot of interpersonal issues that he's trying to fix, a lot of mental facilities that he's trying to correct within himself, trying to figure out what his art really means to people. Very late in his life that he found success, but at the same time people warmed up to his essence and warmed up to his art, and he changed the way art was looked at. He wanted to actually feel what he was painting, and he didn't just want to paint just because he's trying to make stuff look pretty. He wanted to paint just to feel it. He wants people to feel what he was painting, sort of. And people didn't respect him until later on in his life, before he died. And he died very young and with a lot of baggage mentally in his head, and he couldn't straighten it out. He really didn't have somebody who completely understood him. And that was his biggest problem in his life, that people didn't necessarily understood his genius and his art when he was living. But for sure, people appreciate him now, and he's considered one of the greatest artists of all time. The greatest artist of all time, contemporary artist of all time. And I think William Dafoe did a good job capturing that inner conflict that Vincent had. The next movie is a documentary. It's a Stan Lee biopic. I think it's called With Great Power Comes Great Responsibility, and that's based off of one of Stan Lee's iconic lines in Spider-Man. And I really appreciate Stan Lee even more than I have. I really didn't know a lot about Stan Lee. I just knew he was that one person who created all the characters and who made cameos in almost every Marvel movie. That's all I knew him of. My first appreciation with cinema was when I saw Spider-Man, the first Spider-Man, and I really appreciated that movie. And that started my journey as a person who watches movies a lot. Stan Lee is a great person. Every single part of his life, he created these. He based these characters off of his life and what happened around him in life. He wanted to talk about racial injustice and inequality. He had Black Panther. He wanted to talk about the war. He had the Hulk, Captain America. He wanted to talk about how people are different, but we can embrace people's differences. When he has the X-Men. Every single one of his characters that he created with his partner really are timeless because he had something to bring to those characters. They weren't one-dimensional. They were three-dimensional. They had layers. Their personal lives were more important than their superpowers, and it kind of overcame their superpowers. I really appreciate this man because he's a man who worked his butt off to get what he wanted and was kind and just treat people with respect all his life. And that speaks volumes on people who's trying to make it into the industry. It's crazy how you just do things from the heart and what that can give you. Just have genuine characters, tell genuine stories, and that's all you really gotta do as a creator who wants to be in this visual media. That's all I can really tell anybody who wants to do this. I feel like Stan Lee was that genuine person that everybody should strive to be. As long as he lived, he kept that same energy, and I really respect that of him. And the last movie I'm going to talk about before I go into like some accessory stuff that I've seen that's notable that I would like to talk about more, is The Witch. This is Robert Eggers' first film. Unlike The Lighthouse, they're both kind of similar, The Witch and The Lighthouse. They're both period pieces. They both have their own distinct style, and you can see it. And they both are very unique in its approach to shooting. I've been trying to watch this movie 3 or 4 times, and I've been trying to really get into what I've been seeing. Not because I have a problem with watching it, just because of the dialogue. That's how unique and different the dialogue is. You really don't hear people talking in Old English, but these people are based off of old folk tales, Old English, New England folk tales, and New England culture back in the day. People didn't talk like how I'm talking right now. It was very, like, I can only imagine when you see, if you have a religious text that you look up to, that you read constantly, like say like the Bible, they talked in such a way that you have to decode and you have to think on what they're saying. And it's not like complicated, but it's a different way of thinking, it's a different way of talking, and that's how it was when I saw The Witch. It was completely different when it comes to the dialogue. That's why I really had 2 or 3 attempts to watch this, because I just really want to absorb the dialogue. And I think I got the gist of what the movie is. It's kind of simple in its core, but very complex in some of its themes and some of its storytelling. It's very simple, just basically about a family who's been banished, and a sinister presence looms over them once they move to a different area. A sinister presence looms over them as they settle in a different area. They settle in a different place, an unfamiliar place. And that's basically what I'm going to tell you without spoiling it. It's about a witch. It's about witches and stuff, and it's pretty self-explanatory right there. And the next thing I'm going to talk about is Krisha, the short film. Now, the short film carries the same weight, the tone, the action, the dialogue as the feature film. It's just condensed, and you really get a definite climax, and then you really knew that was over at the end of the movie. You really see what happens at the end of the movie. You really see what the conclusion is of the end of the movie, if that makes sense. You really see that it's the end of the story, and there's a definite end. Unlike the feature film, I didn't feel like there was an ending. Krisha, the short film, there's a definite end of that movie. And it's basically the same as the feature film, just condensed. The last thing we're going to talk about is Mucho, Amor. Now, I got to tell you, Netflix has come out with 2 documentary bangers back to back. I'm realizing that Tiger King came in the same year as what's going on right now. I feel like Tiger King came out a couple months, like 2 years ago. I'm so lost with time right now. Why I say that is because Mucho Amor is just as good as Tiger King. You're talking about a person who's completely different in society's eyes, but is iconic in a lot of people's eyes. Now, Walter Mercado is a caricature in itself. He's kind of larger than life, and these two. And when I say that Tiger King is similar to Walter Mercado's documentary of Mucho Amor, I really mean it, because these two people are larger than life. And this documentary with Walter Mercado just shows how someone who did something for a little while just carries that same mystique wherever he goes. When you see him on TV, that's what you're going to get off camera. And it's just amazing to see what type of person he was, and how like mysterious at the same time he was, and how mysterious he was, but at the same time you could understand and relate to him in such a way, sort of. And he just has like a charismatic aura to him that you really kind of sit there in awe and appreciate from him. That being said, that's all I can really say about the documentary, because I was just floored by what I was watching. I never in my life heard about him. And that's it for the What to Watch List episode 3. Wow, we're already at number 3. If you have any movie suggestions, any show stuff you want to recommend to me, put it in the comments. Anything at all you want to tell me, put it in the comments. If you like this video, like if you like, dislike if you don't, share if you care, subscribe if you like what you're seeing. That's pretty much it.